All right. Well, hey, everybody. It's Eric alongside Rod, live with some breaking news as four-star shooting guard recruit Jasiah Jervis committed to MSU today. Before we begin, a big thank you to Thomas Duncan, who joined the growing legion of supporters of the show on Patreon and Substack. Like the other paid supporters, Thomas will get ad-free versions of the show emailed to him, as well as joining a pretty awesome community, including Patreon supporters at the Teen Cleaves level: Bill Church, Brian O'Donnell, Michael Bosnick, Chad Hickey, Mike Huntoon, and Scott Driscoll. Draymond Green supporters: Adam Walzak, Dan Rankin, Jim L., David Brame, Paul Marsh, and Greg Bamer, as well as all Scott Skyle supporters, and Rich Wagenheim, Kenneth Cremett, Roger Bronsink, Al, Michael Emmerich, Joan VT, and Jim Rainey on Substack. If you want to support the show, please head on over to our support page at tffinots.com/support to get the links. So now to the news. Four-star shooting guard from White Plains, New York, committed today to Tom Izzo and the Spartans for the next year's team. Jervis is a consensus top 40 guy. He's, I think, number 22 in Rivals, number 34 on threes recruiting services. He was also being pursued by Tennessee, NC State, and Pitt. His selection reveal party was like, well, I shouldn't say party. It was, the reveal was pretty fun. You can kind of check it out on X. It's pretty quick, where he picked up all four schools' caps, set them all down, and then stood up and ripped off, opened his jacket to reveal Michigan State shirt. But let's talk about
but you know what was really good about that ceremony?
What's that?
And I attribute this as the son and grandson of New York Catholic Athletic Association members, not that school, but they were right on time. Those things never get started on time. They're often like 20 minutes late. That thing, 1 o'clock, bam, coaches at the podium speaking. They go right into it. Yeah, he did the hat dance, but other than that, it was about as straightforward as you're going to see, and I thought that was great.
Well, that's great. So let's talk about Jervis. I mean, he's obviously come from New York, so we've gotten to this point now where, I mean, I guess the Midwest recruiting is pretty much out the window now for Michigan State. I think now is a national recruitment for Michigan State, which, I mean, we've talked about this before as far as Tom Izzo goes. I mean, he has the pull, to the gravitas to really be able to recruit anywhere in the country, and certainly outside the Midwest. And so this kid's from New York. He's top 40 kid. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Jervis? We've talked about it before in the show, but for those who may not remember.
Well, I want to talk about your first point there. I don't think it's that Michigan State. I guess I need to know what you meant. If by that you meant they're no longer exclusively focused on the upper Midwest, that's absolutely true.
Right.
There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
They're still going to, I think the deal is they're always going to be Midwest first. If there's a kid in Michigan that's good enough to play for Michigan State and is their kind of guy, an OKG, they're going to recruit that kid. Same would hold true for the border states: Ohio, Indiana, Illinois,
right,
Wisconsin, even. The guy who probably at some point this weekend is going to make this a 4-man recruiting class. Ethan Taylor. We'll talk about him a little bit in a little bit more detail, but he's from Missouri, so that's a little further afield, but not much. But I do think there's no question that in large part, I think because the upper Midwest isn't producing quite as much talent as it once did, particularly the state of Michigan in recent years, you don't have a choice. If you want to remain a relevant program, you got to go further afield. And, it seems to me that Michigan State has been doing a great job in identifying guys who are out of the region, but who fit the Michigan State profile and are going to be receptive to Tom Izzo's recruiting message. I mean, if you look at it in recent years, the current freshman class, one guy from Virginia, one guy from Maryland, but what we've seen thus far, Cam Ward, Jordan Scott couldn't be better fits with Tom Izzo basketball. You go to the class before that. I mean, we got to see a lot more grit out of Kerr. We'll see. But Jace Richardson fit the mold. And even though he's a Michigan State legacy, not Not a guy who he didn't grow up in Michigan.
Right.
He didn't grow up in the Midwest. So, on and on we go. Cohen Carr from Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's an OKG. So we see this now, and that's I think the assistants deserve a lot of credit for that. I think that the guys that they've hired and in some cases rehired in recent years, that has allowed for a broader scope. John Borovich, what I understand, one of the reasons he was brought in is, and he had been a GA at Michigan State
years before he went to Northwestern.
Yeah. Right. And he had some jobs at Oakland. He had some jobs before Northwestern. But one of the reasons they hired Borovich is that because he had been at Northwestern, and they have to recruit a little differently for academic reasons and also just program poll reasons. They're not going to go compete on McDonald's All-Americans typically. He had developed a lot of relationships that could be utilized by a program with bigger pull in Michigan State. I think if you look at the names that get cited by the guys they've recruited as being the primary assistant on them, Doug Wojcik's name comes up a lot. I think Sadie Washington clearly has had an impact on some recruitment. So we're seeing this with some regularity. So I think you got to give those guys credit. And then, of course, the guy who's the closer, Tom Izzo. We talked about it at the time with Jasiah Jervis. It was not an accident that they had him in here for grind week for his official. Yeah. And from, I mentioned to you before we started recording, I was on Jack Ebling's show today, and Jack was talking about a couple different things that he had become privy to about this recruitment. One is that Magic played a substantial role. Now, I don't know that was financial. It was hard I didn't really have time as we were on the air to press it, but he said, the direct quote, Jack said, I don't think they get him without Magic. So there's that. There's also the fact that Josiah's parents were able to talk. You got to remember, Grind Week, it's not just about the guys who were there. It's also in some cases, parents of those guys. And in this case in particular, Josiah's parents were able to talk to Jaron Jackson's mom, who laid it out and said, this is what your kid is going to get, what he's going to benefit from if he's playing at Michigan State. And so those were two things that I don't think haven't been well reported, that according to what Jack was told, at least, were very important. So all of that played into it. Michigan State rolled out the red carpet, as they always do, for visits during Grind Week. And clearly it had an impact. I think it also, for any kid, and he mentioned it when he talked about what he was looking for in a school, any kid for whom and these are cliches, but we all know the deal. The family atmosphere matters. Yeah. You're not going to get a better example of that than Michigan State generally, but especially during Grind Week. And I think in his case, because he said it so often, I suspect it did matter. And for some guys, it does. So all of those things, I think, were big factors. The word on this one now, it's interesting. There's a couple of countervailing schools of thought on the money aspect here.
Yeah.
Jack told me that his understanding is Michigan State was at least $200,000 below the high offer for Josiah.
Okay.
Maybe that's true.
That's crazy that is a lower, that there's something above that.
Right. I don't know what the number,
the money amount. Right.
My understanding is at one point the bidding got up, closing in on 7 digits.
Whew.
7 figures. I don't know that for sure, but that was the word. However, it's worth mentioning that and I think we've mentioned this name here before. There's a guy named, well, it's a nom de plume, pseudonym, Trilly Donovan,
Right.
who almost certainly is a college basketball media figure of some type. But for that account, he retains anonymity. And the Trilly Donovan account, which started as a Twitter account, and is now, I guess he's got a Discord that he is subscription. And that's where most of the information appears. Trilly is generally really well plugged in. Yeah, he was not great for Michigan State info for a long time. And I believe the story was he even admitted he didn't have any direct contacts there, but I think he claims to now.
He must. Yeah, right.
Yeah. His quotes apparently today were Tom Izzo basically has an unlimited bank account for this stuff. And there was a comparison to an ATM. Now, I'm going to suspect that the truth is somewhere in between those two, because Jack seemed to be suggesting, yeah, this was kind of a standard Michigan State recruitment the last few years since NIL has come in, where they're not necessarily the high bidder, but they went out because of all these other things,
right?
You know, and Trilly Donovan seems to be suggesting, yeah, all that stuff matters, but Michigan State's competing on the money side now too with anybody.
Yeah.
Supposedly, the earlier in this recruitment, like back in maybe September, closer to when he visited, there was a lot of smoke around NC State. And then that seemed making strong ass off.
Yeah, right.
And then that started to fade. And more recently, there was a suggestion that Tennessee was going all in. Didn't matter in either case. But I do think that it's interesting. And as I say, I think the truth is probably somewhere in between those two poles. I think that Michigan State clearly is competing on the money end. I think this recruitment, the Ethan Taylor recruitment, honestly, for as much as those guys wanted to come to Michigan State, I think if Michigan State was getting outbid by a lot, you'd be seeing a different decision.
Yeah. But so I think that's been the case for a while.
So these guys were both hot commodities. And, both we were talking before we went on air, both, I think, potentially McDonald's All-Americans. I'd bet on Taylor, and it would seem to me that Jervis has a shot. So those kind of guys are going to have, even though the price tags are not the same as we've seen in portal cycles lately, still for guys at that level, it matters. And for Michigan State to be closing the deal on these recruitments, they are clearly competing on the money side. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But does that mean that they're, Indiana or whoever else has been throwing around just boatloads of cash in recruiting lately? I would say I don't necessarily believe that, mostly because I don't think they'd have to be. With all the other things that they've got to sell, it's just, you can't be, several $100,000 below, but you don't necessarily need to be the top bidder in every recruitment. I don't think the top bidder wins every high level recruitment.
We see that in free agency in professional sports, right? Do I want to take
free agents
don't play for the Browns or whatever?
Right. Free agents don't always take the single biggest offer on the table.
Yeah.
And I think, Michigan State is one of those have programs that's in a position that they can, they just got to be in the game. They got to be in the ballpark. And then you let the other things work themselves out. One other thing I wanted to mention about Tennessee before we move on. What's really encouraging to me about that, because this wasn't a Duke, Kansas, Kentucky. You look at the final programs he had. He had NC State. He had Tennessee, he had Pitt, and Michigan State. So that's an interesting mix. Pitt really hasn't been very good for quite a while. They're trying. NC State with a first-year head coach and Will Wade. I think most of our listeners know something, at least, of his story. I expect he's going to, whatever I think of him as an individual, I do think he's a good basketball coach, and I think he's going to have NC State in competition at the top of the ACC, possibly this year. It might just be, it might happen immediately.
Yeah.
They did a good enough job in portal recruiting that at least the talent level looks good enough. Whether they're able to compete, we'll see on the court, but he'll have them up there soon enough anyway. And then Tennessee, that's the one that's intriguing to me. And it's not that you need or look for verification or anything. If Tom Izzo was all in on a guy the way he was on Jervis, that's verification enough. You know, I mentioned to Jack, Tom Izzo always recruits hard, but there are a few guys you can look at over the years where he went balls to the wall on the recruitments. Gary Harris was one. Shannon Brown was one, where he's every time they look up, he's there. This was another one of those. And my understanding is they thought he was the best two-way wing in the country. Forget the rankings. They thought he was the top guy when you factor in both sides of the ball. But anyway, getting back to Tennessee, you know, Rick Barnes, who Izzo has a good relationship with, and I think it's for obvious reasons. Rick Barnes, from what I've observed over the years, tends to value a lot of the same things basketball-wise that Tom Izzo does. And so if Tennessee was going all in on a guy, in addition to Michigan State, what that tells me is, yeah, this is a guy who profiles as athletic, as a skilled wing, could score in a lot of different ways, and who has the potential to defend and has a toughness about him. So I think that's the thing you should be encouraged by in terms of what those other schools' involvements mean. You know, I think that that's how I would take it, seeing Tennessee in there that way.
Well, I want to say a quick hi to Scott Yu, JT, JJ McKay, and I think that's all that I've made comments. Please comment and leave a comment below if you're on YouTube or X, just kind of where you're listening from. Just a reminder also, it is the fall. Make sure you take care of those leaves. Check out the Brothers Just You Gutters. They do fantastic work. You get 10% off by mentioning the word Final Four. When you get your estimate, you can do that at our support page, whether you're on the east or the west side of the state of Michigan, at tffinots.com/support, which also reminds me that you can check out the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids as well. If you need your windows cleaned, which I still need to do, and I will get to it, I promise. Or my wife, I got to get around. I get on that. Take care. They'll also take care of the side of the house. They'll do some power washing as well. And then you get 15% off if you mention Final Four to Troy and his team in the greater Grand Rapids area. They can take care of any size building, whether it's your home, whether it's your business, high rise, if you're a landlord or something like that. They'll take care of all of that. So again, that's all at our support page at tffinots.com/support.
I don't know about your side of the state, but my neighborhood has a ton of old growth trees, big trees. And we have definitely hit full on fall now. It was delayed a little bit.
It was
we're there
for
with
sure.
The leaves. So yeah, probably no better time than to get the brothers out.
You strike me as a guy who loves raking leaves. I don't know. Am I wrong there?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things to do. I find it very meditative.
Yeah.
Jesus
I can
Christ.
imagine.
Why don't we have a raker as a sponsor on this?
Oh man, I tell you what,
those guys with the bags and the hose.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Anyway.
So well, let's talk about Jervis a little bit. We've talked about it in the past, obviously previous shows. You mentioned, elite wing, plays two ways, and that's almost what you'd expect. You're not going to expect a pure shooter to come into Michigan State, at least not to be for Izzo to be that excited about a guy who.
You mean just a pure shooter?
Correct. Someone who plays both ends.
Right.
I mean, we were seeing that I think we've seen great examples with the two freshmen this year, Cam Ward and Jordan Scott. Both play defense really hard. They're disruptive. They seem to kind of figure things out. And they have offensive ends, obviously, is there too. But that is not, I don't want to say that Izzo doesn't value those things, but he certainly values the other sort of things, the OKG stuff, right? We'll call it, but just the defensive intensity and sort of that ability to be disruptive on that end. And from all accounts, it sounds like Jervis is that kind of player.
Yeah. As I said, my understanding is, and they certainly recruited him this way, so I don't think it's hyperbolic. They thought he was the best two-way wing in the country, which is a hell of a statement.
Yeah.
The first thing that gets people's attention with him is his offensive game. So we'll talk about that. You've got his high school
stats up on the board
his
here.
high school stats up there. Add to that what you've got there. He shot 40% from three, which I'm sure is going to be music to a lot of people's ears, right?
Let me go over the numbers real quick because people who are listening obviously can't see. So average a little over 16 points a game, over 5 rebounds a game, 3 assists, and almost 2 steals a game.
Yeah. So he's a very good jump shooter. And the nice thing about him is he's a good jump shooter in two ways. He's a good spot up shooter, but they say he's really learned to use screens and to shoot coming off screens well. So that's a big deal at Michigan State. We all know, if you watch Michigan State offensive basketball for a long time, you know Michigan State will use pin down screens. They'll use lots of different action to get shooters open, even in the mid-range, not just for threes. And he apparently has a very advanced ability to do that for a guy who's still going to yet to play his senior year of high school. So that's encouraging. They also like his ability to square people up and take them to the basket. He can attack closeouts. So if he's got somebody off balance defensively, he's got good instincts and athleticism to get by them. Good athlete in general. Again, not the Cohen Carr caliber, but a good athlete. Which is important in Michigan State because, of course, you're playing the wing. You got to run those lanes in transition.
Right.
So he should fit perfectly in that way. There's a feeling that his ability to be a primary option, let's say, as a pick and roll guy, is still developing, but they like his handle. This is reading scouting reports, and that, the feeling is he's eventually going to get there. I don't know how much of a weapon that's going to be in year one. I don't think he's a combo guard. I don't think he's somebody that you're going to ask to play point, but should be good enough as a secondary ball handler to help out. And, that matters. That's important too. We see at times with the current roster, it feels like maybe they're a guy short in that regard, which might end up being why they may play somebody like Uchukwu more minutes than originally thought. It's possible because they feel like they might need more of that. We'll see. But with Jervis, I think no question he'll be able to do that. You see the rebounding stats, pretty decent for a wing, 5.3 or his high school team. It should be noted he played both high school and AAU. His high school team is loaded. They're the number one team in the country in the preseason. And he plays with two 6'11" twins, the Ratliff twins, who both committed to USC recently. They are the sons of former Piston, among other NBA teams, Theo Ratliff. And they're both ranked even higher than Josiah is. So for him to rebound that well on a team that had that much legit size, that tells you something. So again, OKG type guy, a wing who wants to stick his nose in and rebound. The thing that I think I'm going to guess is responsible for selling them on him to the point that they said, we're going all out, we got to have this guy, is the defensive end, though. He's 6'4", 6'5", depending upon who you ask, but has a 6'8" wingspan.
Holy moly.
That's a big deal.
That's being bigger than Trey's disruptive.
Well, and it puts him in, and you got Jordan Scott now, 6'8" with a 6'10" wingspan.
Yeah, right.
They're getting some guys that fit that mold. So you put that together with his mindset and his athletic ability, there's no good reason to suspect that he won't eventually be at least a solid defensive player, and maybe better than that. But I think that's the thing. When you see Michigan State and Tennessee both going all in, you have to figure, for a wing, you have to figure, okay, that's a guy they think can become very good defensively. It's a trait those programs share. So
Right.
I suspect that end is probably what got them to go from recruiting him to all out, pull out all the stops, do whatever it takes to get him.
Yeah. So, I think one of the interesting things to discuss too, before we close here, also just a reminder, of course, Nudge Printing, they provide all the prizes for our show. So if you enter the Beat Rod contest, and I've been getting entries for that, also just a reminder. So 1 through 18, the final standings for the Big Ten, send along to me, Eric at tffinots.com. Please add the tiebreaker, unless you want to have an email communication with me, because I have to keep emailing people to remind them. So how many points Michigan State scores in their 2 games against Michigan. So, 140 points, let's say, if you think they'll score 70 each game. So send that along to me. You get the prices from Nudge Printing. They have fantastic Spartan apparel. You get 20% off. You just type in Final Four as one word at checkout. Check them out at nudgeprinting.com. You'll be very glad you did. Also, hi to Jay Truth and eHearts Hoops 55. Thanks for joining us. So, there's always been this talk about, and you sort of touched a little bit on Izzo not spending money, but I think, the NIL era, as terrible as I should say, just as disruptive and kind of weird as it makes the sport, it has freed Izzo in some respects, because the thing that he never could do, at least it seemed like he couldn't do, is he just couldn't match the money that was flowing around, because I think he ran a pretty straight recruiting. I mean, there are people
You're talking about pre-NIL?
Pre-NIL, yeah. And
so sure. They didn't cheat. They didn't pay back.
I mean, right. And so there are a lot of recruitments that he lost, which were either known or very highly suspected of because of money. And now he doesn't have that. Now he doesn't have that thing in his problem. And I think, but also there's a point, people say he's stingy, whatever. But I think, your point is, just because you have the most money doesn't mean you're going to take it. And also you want to make sure people are coming, that are the right type of people and have the right motivations for joining your team.
That's right.
Right. That's also important too, that if they're just there for money, not that money is bad or that it's going to make you change your motivation, but if that's sort of your primary concern, that's probably not the right person you're going to want on your team for Michigan State, especially.
I don't think things have fundamentally changed even from this spring, when I know Michigan State had guys they decided not to recruit in the portal because the feeling was what those guys were asking for did not match the valuation that Michigan State put on those guys. And that word has more than one element to its meaning, to its definition.
Right.
Part of it is, okay, how's that going to sit in the locker room? If we're paying this guy $3 million or $2 million, what does that mean? What might that mean we have to do for other guys? Because how are they going to take it when this guy is getting that amount of money? All that stuff factors in. So the fact that Michigan State has demonstrated a willingness to spend, what it says to me is they demonstrated a willingness to spend for guys that they identified that they wanted and that they felt made sense and were fits, all the stuff you were just talking about. Right. So I think that's the right way to interpret it. Don't think that this is just, hey, Tom Izzo has said there's no limits anymore, and they're going to go, hey, they got a center that they want to play 20 minutes a game, $4 million, sure. It's not going to be that world.
Yeah.
It's just not. But I do think it's, because I've known this. I've been told it by enough people to know that it's true. That the word ever since NIL came in is Michigan State is not going to be outbid for guys that they want. Right. I've had that said more than once by people that would know. And I think some people questioned that because clearly there was money being paid to guys in the portal that was beyond anything Michigan State was paying.
Yeah, right.
But, it's interesting that up until this year, and I don't think in the end it was because of money, they hadn't lost anybody that they wanted to retain. So think about what that means. Doesn't mean that Michigan State was willing to spend more than anybody else would have to steal those guys, but they were able to be competitive. They had to be, guys are not going to leave, multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table.
Right.
Most of them won't. Some might, but most won't. And they've managed to hold on to the guys other than Trey Holloman that they wanted, So
right.
I think,
and they may not have wanted him enough to pay what extra he was getting paid. I mean, correct. Clearly, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there's that. I think this makes it beyond a shadow of a doubt, though. This recruitment and the Ethan Taylor recruitment, it's very clear. Those were big boy recruitments in terms of, for a high school player, the money that was going to be required. And Michigan State has won one today. They're going to get another one. I'm convinced. I'm not going to tell you exactly how I know that, but I'm convinced that they're going to get Ethan Taylor at some point in the next few days. And it's just, if you doubted it, despite years of people that would know saying, yeah, the money's there. It's not that the resources haven't been there. It's that Tom Izzo has intentionally gone about business his way.
Yeah.
And that's not the same way that a lot of other guys go about it. He's got his own thought process on this stuff. And, but again, I think what these prove is, if you're the right guy, he's going to spend what it takes to be competitive on that front, and then let all the other stuff win, the stuff that should decide it, win the recruitment.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. I think that too many people look at this and say, well, Indiana's willing to spend $1.5 million on, Morballo last year or whatever it might be, these players, and Izzo's just been too cheap and stingy. It is really important to recognize that this is not Izzo's money. So he has to ask someone for the money, or they have to, provide it up. And yes, these big donors may have big pockets, and they may, they trust Izzo. But part of the reason they trust him and they're willing to give the money is because they know that his evaluation is at least as accurate as possible, and he's not wasting money.
That's right.
They trust him. It is a trust process. They trust him, and by maintaining that trust with the donors, he can then go back to them next year or the year after, rather than just kind of blowing a bunch of money. Because imagine if you're that Indiana donor, you paid a bunch of money, you got this, and you had this totally dysfunctional team that just didn't look like they knew what they're doing on the floor.
Well,
how likely are you the next year to go and say and give the Woodson, here's $10 million to do it again? You're very unlikely to do that. And so that is the thing I think that people totally forget when it comes to Izzo and spending the money. I mean, I'm not saying Izzo is perfect or anybody, but and this is evaluation, which might sometimes be wrong. But the key is that he values it. He values it, and he values his relationship with these donors, and recognizes that you just can't throw money around without any sort of plan or like any actual discernment.
Yep, I agree. I agree with all that. And of course, the other element again is he wants to maintain harmony in his locker room on his team.
Absolutely.
And so you've got to be smart about how you allocate the resources that are there and available to you. So yeah, I agree with all of that. But putting all that stuff aside, just purely from a basketball perspective, from a potential perspective, this is a big addition. I mean, the two guys Michigan State added before, Carlos Medlock, I love as a future lead guard type. I think he's going to be really good. And Julius Avant, I think we talked about when he committed. He's an MSU kind of guy in terms of good size, but multi-skilled, can do a lot of different things. Probably a power forward at this level, but could potentially play some wing. MSU's had a lot of guys like that. They got guys like that on this year's team. So, and again, a player like Jasiah Jervis, who's played really high level basketball in the Northeast, both high school and AAU. And it should be noted too, I did not know this until today. I think it was Paul Conendike at Spartan Mag pointed it out. Those two guys played for different AAU teams this year. They played for rival EYBL Nike teams, but the year before, when they played 16s, they both played for PSA Cardinals, which is a New York area team. So they've been teammates before. And I remember when Julius committed, he was asked about Josiah, and he had said, yeah, I'm going to be recruiting him. I want to play with him. So that's always a positive when you've got guys that have a pre-existing relationship. The other thing that's going to be cool on that front is Carlos Medlock and
Ethan
Taylor are teammates this year at Link Prep in Missouri. They haven't played together yet in a real game, but they're about to. And so that is going to, I mean, this is shaping up to be one hell of a class. They're going
to have chemistry coming in, right? Yeah, for sure. So, you feel pretty confident about Ethan Taylor, and
I am as confident as you could possibly be about a guy who has not yet had his commitment press conference. Yes.
Exactly. And then, the question, I think, for Jim McKay, who apparently is up in Keweenaw, holy cow, he must be one of the 3 people who live up in the peninsula there, that he thought, is that you're thinking Taylor's is it for the class, right? For 2026. I mean,
no, not necessarily.
You think they could go?
I think there's everything I've heard. Maximo Adams is the other guy who's on the table,
and that's who he mentioned.
Just to reset that for people, 6'7" but strong, put together, like maybe 215, 220 from Southern California. And again, that's an area where Michigan State does not typically recruit, but they got in on him. Made an immediate impression. They got involved this spring, made an immediate impression, got him up here for a recruiting visit, and it apparently went extremely well. Now, at the time MSU, at the time he took that visit, there seemed to be some suggestion that, Duke is a team you got to worry about. Mm-hmm. Well, he took an official to Duke, or he was going to, he had it scheduled, ended up canceling it.
Yeah.
So he's not going to go to Duke. He announced a Final 3 the other day. It's North Carolina, Texas, and Michigan State. Now, I'm not saying I think Michigan State is the favorite necessarily. I'm not saying that I think that it's a definite or even extremely strong possibility that he ends up at Michigan State. But I've seen some people discount the possibility of that, and I think that's a mistake. He's taken all his visits. So when that decision comes, who knows? It doesn't seem like that, with Taylor, the feeling seems to be by the end of this weekend, that will be announced. I've heard nothing along those lines with Maximo Adams. That could go on for a while. It could end tomorrow.
Yeah.
But I do not rule out Michigan State getting him. He absolutely, if he came and Taylor commits, Michigan State would have a perfectly aligned 5-man group with that.
That's like the old line change you could almost,
It is, because Medlock is going to be a point guard. Jervis is clearly a 2. We've talked about Julius Avant could play on the wing, but I think primarily he's going to be a 4-man in college. He seems to profile that way. Then you have Ethan Taylor at the 5. So what's Maximo Adams? Maximo Adams is tough enough. He was one of the top 3 rebounders in all of EYBL at 6'7". So he's clearly tough enough to play the 4, but he profiles more as a wing. So he could a big wing, the Cohen Carr, Josiah Scott kind of role. Jordan Scott, sorry.
Jordan Scott, yeah.
Got
too many J names now.
Jordan Scott. But it could work, absolutely. Now, it's going to depend. One thought that's out there, which I don't think is entirely wrong, is would Maximo Adams commit to Michigan State not knowing for sure what Cohen Carr is doing? Because it's a very different situation.
Right.
If Cohen Carr is there or he's not there. If he's not there and you're Maximo Adams, you could reasonably believe you'd at least have a shot to compete to start.
Right.
If Cohen's there, well, you're not starting.
Yeah, right.
That's done. So, and we don't know. I mean, I think the general feeling around Spartan land is that Cohen probably is done with college basketball after this year. Now, I will say although he's been fine thus far in the exhibitions in the first regular season game. Does he need to show more to make that come to pass? Yes, I think he probably does. But I also think it's entirely possible and maybe even probable that we will see more out of him. So in any event, that's where it sits. But I do not rule out Michigan State from having a legitimate shot at getting Maximo Adams. I think all accounts were that he loved his visit, and he's clearly an Izzo style kid. No question about that.
Mm-hmm.
The way he plays, all of that, he would fit in very well in this program. So exciting times. I think that to see Michigan State recruiting again this way now keep in mind, it was only a couple of years ago we had that class with Booker and Fears and Carr and Garrick Norman that was very highly regarded. I think this one is going to be a little more highly regarded, and I think it's got a better chance of guys meeting their potential than that one did, although I think Michigan State's going to go 2 for 4 on that front, but with Fears and Carr, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's great to see, a situation where I don't think there's a lot of people after last year talking this way, but still probably a little bit of, I'm sure Izzo deals with it on the recruiting trail. I'm positive that he gets negative recruited, at least to some degree, by coaches who say, well, how long is he going to be there? Now, in a world where you could transfer out, I'm not sure how much that matters anymore.
I don't think that's kind of an advantage for Izzo, I think, at this point. I mean, people can't,
doesn't necessarily have the same gravitas that it once had. But regardless, he's dispensing with all that stuff, with not just with getting these guys, but the way he went about it, how relentless he was. And again, how much harder it is for him, because this isn't, he can drive to Chicago in 4 hours.
He's flying all over the place.
He's got to fly
time zones.
Everywhere.
Yeah. No question. It makes it a lot harder.
Off, man, that you could, if you're a Michigan State fan, this is a really good day and hopefully a really good weekend, both on and off the court.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think to your point about Carr, and someone, JT mentioned that he thought he's not ready. I don't think anything that's to your point. He's not, but we also are 30 games from being the end of the season. So we got a long ways to go. Players change a ton. Just think where Carr was last year at the beginning of the season and then where he finished, light years.
There's that. And it's still the case that for the pros, yes, production does matter, but it's not everything.
Yeah. You got to show
Carr. Yeah. I do think that, what you can say is he needs to show more with the handle, because at his size, he might have to play the 2, maybe. I could see him at the 3, but he might, he's listed at 6'6". I don't think anybody believes he's 6'6". And so that I understand the point that person is making. I'm just saying, I don't think that's going to be what decides it.
Yeah. I don't
think, he's still a little rough around the edges. I don't think that's going to decide it.
I trust no one more than Carr to make a big jump to make it there too. Would you say?
I'm prepared in my mind for him to not be on next year's team. If he is, that's a really, really pleasant development for Michigan State.
I'm savoring every home game I get to watch him play this year. And then I think that very interesting thing too, way back to your comment on Grind Week with parents there, it had never occurred to me that parents would be there too, but that would be in
fairness, I should offer a caveat there. It may have been that they had that conversation at Grind Week. I'm not certain of that.
Right.
I think it might have happened there, or might have just been a byproduct of it. And then a phone call was had. But
either way,
they did
it's very interesting.
Darren's mother. Yeah.
Yeah. That you have parents recruiting as well, or at least telling people because that makes a huge difference, because parents are, they're part of that recruitment process, what their role in it is, varies from kid to kid, I suppose. But
again, when they talk about a family atmosphere, remember for years now, Michigan State has had that Francis Cleves Family Center at the
Right.
Breslin, which is a place that families can wait for their kids to come out of the locker room after a game and see them. Michigan State has always done. You think about her and Charlie Bell's mom and Morris Peterson's mom, how involved and what fixtures they were. And it's continued on through the years. And I'm sure everybody remembers Travis Trice's mother and her bizarre whistling or noise making routine during opponent free throws. I mean, and there have been a couple of occasions where that hasn't gone as well, but for the most part, parental involvement is something Izzo clearly wants, cultivates, and you see why. That you can have a guy years away from his Michigan State experience, and that parent, because they had a positive experience, is still going to be an asset for you 8 years down the line.
Finally, a quick question from JT. So he said he may have missed this, but any comparison for Jervis or Taylor? He said he's heard that Jervis has sort of been compared to Gary Harris. Kind of curious if there are any comparisons you've heard about Taylor.
He said that recently in an interview, and you got to believe that was a comparison
he being Izzo
from Michigan State.
Oh, he said that.
No, Jervis.
Jervis,
said that in an interview. He said, some people have told me I play like Gary Harris. That's got to have come from Michigan State, you would think. Yeah, I think that's a fair one because, what was Gary? A two-way player, right? Like
right out of the gate.
Right from Jump Street.
Exactly.
That guy from day one of his freshman year could go out and guard people. And yet he was a multi-dimensional scorer. I think it's possible that Jervis might be maybe a tick better jump shooter. Gary was good, but I get the sense that Jervis might able to be at some point be better than good as a jump shooter. But yeah, I think that's a fair comparison. With Ethan Taylor, this was, I mentioned this to Jack today on his show. They were involved with Reed, the other big man at
Terrace
Academy.
Reed.
Yeah. And I like him. He ended up committing last week to Mississippi State.
Right.
I like him. I think much like his older brother, I think he's underrated, although he's starting to actually rise up the rankings now. I've seen he's in the top 70 now. When Michigan State first offered, he might have just been inside the top 100, like in the high 90s. So he's rising, and I think that's justified. I look at him, and I'm going to make this comparison between he and Taylor along Michigan State lines, and I think and it's very general. Don't take it too literally, but I think you'll get what I mean. I look at Reed, and I think that's a guy that if all goes well, really well, could be a Xavier Tillman type. He's a big, strong kid, but he's got good footwork. I think he's going to be like his brother. I think he's got the potential to be a really good defensive big man. You understand why Michigan State was involved because he's got that combination of size and ability to move his feet. You don't have to play drop coverage with him. You can play hedge. You can be aggressive. And he's got a high motor. All those things. If you could be Xavier Tillman, that's a hell of a thing. You talk about one of the best centers in Michigan State history, guy who's already had a decently long NBA career to date, has won a world championship, and it doesn't look like he's going anywhere anytime soon. But I think Ethan Taylor could be a Jaren Jackson. And there is a difference. Now, one difference, which might be negative from a Michigan State standpoint, you'd expect to have Reed multiple years.
Right.
You might not get Taylor more than one. It's possible. But I just think he's 7'1". He's solid already. I think they list him at 240 or 250. I think Link's going to be on television a fair amount. I think Stepanak will be on television some too. So we should have ample opportunity this winter to see all these guys playing in high school, which is great. But Ethan Taylor has size, length, athletic ability. He's not the three-point shooter Jaren was, so as I say, don't take it too literally. But I just mean, you look at Reed and you say, that's a guy who, if everything goes well, could be a really good college player for multiple years and might be able to have a pro career. Whereas you look at Ethan Taylor and you say, that's a guy who, if all goes well, could be an NBA All-Star.
Yeah. Well, that's a big difference.
There's
there.
a difference.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
There is a difference.
All right. Well, I think we'll wrap up there. This content just keeps coming. So thanks again to all the people who support the show, not only financially through donations through PayPal and Venmo, and through recurrent donations on Patreon and Substack, but also by visiting our sponsors, Brothers Just Gutters, Nudge Printing, and the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. You can check that out at our support page at tffinots.com. We really appreciate that. But it allows us to do this extra streaming and do these adding things, added value for your support. So we'll be back, I guess, if Taylor announces soon, we'll be back then.
So I was just looking at the comments, and somebody had an interesting thought, which is worth keeping in mind, just to go back to the Maximo Adams thing for a second.
Yeah.
We also do have to remember, and sometimes it's hard to keep it at front of mind, Caleb Glenn's going to be back next year too.
Exactly. Yeah.
And he is another guy, even if you've got Cohen gone, that's another guy that, I still think it could work potentially, because I think Caleb Glenn looks a lot different to a guy making a decision than Cohen Carr does. Even though we think Caleb Glenn, if healthy, could be a really good player. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's not Cohen Carr. He's not playing this year. So anyway, but that's a worthwhile thought by that listener, because that is another guy that would be a factor at a position that Maximo Adams would be looking to play.
For sure. And the reality is there's so many moving parts at the season, especially the end of the season, who goes where, if they stick around, they leave, and we saw that with Connecticut, with Darius Adams, who had decommitted from Connecticut, ended up in Maryland, I think. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, people just move around. And I think a lot of these things, it's not like these commitments are going to be, people are going to back out of them. But if, something, God forbid, happened to Izzo, all this is off the table, right? I mean, things can change obviously radically, but most likely it's going to be, it just depends on what's going to happen as far as, does Cohen Carr stay? Does he leave? What's going on? Do suddenly people want to say 5-6 years? I mean, crazy things can happen. We don't really know, but either way, we'll see.
I think that, and that's before we go. I think you've opened up something there though. So because got asked that question when you said, are they done?
Are they done? Yeah, right.
Ethan Taylor. I think Maximo Adams is the only other guy in the high school ranks. I don't think you'll see them get involved with a high school player in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at this team, you can see, for as good as Ethan Taylor may be, I suspect that's the one spot. And let's assume that pretty much everybody is back who can be back other than Cohen. So that would mean you've got
McCullough, you've got
Kurtang, Fears, Ugochukwu, and Scott as perimeter guys, right? And then you're adding Medlock and Jervis.
Right.
At the power forward, you got Cam Ward, you've got Avant, and maybe some of Jesse McCulloch. And then at center, you would have Jesse McCulloch, and you'd have Ethan Taylor. I could see them looking to add a veteran 5-man, because I don't think you want to play, for as good as Ethan Taylor may be, that's a lot to ask a freshman to say, be a 25, 26 minute a night guy at that position.
Accountable.
Right. With what Michigan State asks of its fives, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So that's one spot as of now. Now that could shift, as you're talking about. We don't know who's going to leave. Who's going to say, all that's always up in the air perpetually. I would think Michigan State's probably not going to lose guys that they want to keep, because that's generally how it goes.
Yeah.
Trey Holloman be damned. That's generally how it goes.
Yep.
So that would be the one spot right now, looking at it, that I would think, I could see them having interest in the right guy. Kind of also depends on how Jesse McCulloch develops this year.
Yep.
That's a factor
early on him
too.
Still too early to make any judgment. I know people kind of get a little bit crazy, the fact that he's barely played and he's looked a little bit rough, but I mean, he hasn't played this is his first game.
Yeah, I'm still very confident in Jesse McCulloch. I am. And I think he showed great things in that Bowling Green game. Let's not forget.
Yeah, right.
The last two haven't been as strong, but I'm expecting to see productive moments out of him, a lot of them. So anyway.
All right. So just a reminder again, we will be back. Mod for us on X and YouTube if you want to come catch us live. If we have another recruiting announcement from Ethan Taylor, whenever that might be, or anyone else. And then we'll be back tomorrow, I think, with our preview for the Arkansas game. And then, of course, we'll be here live afterwards for the Arkansas post game Saturday night at I don't know, we'll say 10:30-ish, 10:40. Right. Depends on traffic was a little bit worse getting out of there last night. So we'll see how it goes, or Monday night. So anyway, we'll leave it there. And so until next time, the Final Four is on the schedule.